Panama City. Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad. Ay, mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama. 15 August 1519, the beginning of a dream. It is important to know this date because it's the day that we celebrate. Pedro Arias Davila received from the King of España official doctrine for the fealty to be named Panama City, Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, bella mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama. A fishing village it was formerly, right upon the coast of the sea. Cathedral tower built up toward the sky. You can hear that bell toll far and wide. At this time within the nation, there was a very small population, only 100 people or so. First European settlement on Pacific coast, Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, ay mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama. The Camino Real it paved the way, and in this Xmas it had to stay all the way to Nombre de Dios. If you go now, you can hear them ghosts. Whoa! Riches came up out of Peru. Many ship and the pirates knew all the pearls, silver and gold. Panama City was Pacific stronghold. Then they crossed Panama by mule. Tropical diseases was very cruel. Finally arrived to Atlantic coast, departing for Spain from Nombre de Dios. Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, ay mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama. 15 August 1519, the beginning of a dream. It is important you know this date because it's the day that we celebrate. 15 August 1519, the beginning of a dream. It is important to know this date because this is the day that we celebrate. Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, bella mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama, Panama City, Panama City. Oh, welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, ay mi Panama.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 24 of Rapping with Rapscallions. That song you heard in the beginning was Panama City by Shorty and Slim, and with the collaboration by who, my friend Joe? Who?
Oh, the most incredibly talented Rapscallions.
That's right. So you're rapping with Rapscallions today. The topic of today's show is the 20th of December, 1989, Just Cause. And I want to take a little moment to dedicate this show to my Aunt Candy. Gertrude Candy Kepke Helen was the first casualty of Operation Just Cause. And, she was a Zonian like me. She was a Panamanian. She was a U.S. citizen, a dual citizen. She was a school teacher, and she was driving, her and her husband, Uncle Steve Helen, were driving back home from Los Rios after a Christmas party. And an unidentified person in fatigue pants jumped out on the road and shot the back of the car, and she died a few minutes later. So I want to send this, dedicate this to my dear Aunt Candy. I miss you, love you. And just a disclaimer, there's a lot of stories out there that are being lost about what happened during Just Cause. So that's why we picked that as a topic for today's show. We're not experts. We're just here to talk. And try and tell our own story of what we went through during Just Cause. I got my I Survived Just Cause shirt. I dug that one out of the closet, back of the closet. So without further ado, let's get started with the show. And as usual, we start with the Rapping with Rapscallions weekly wrap up. Hit it, Joe.
Well, first of all, HB, I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty impressed because just so people are aware that the chest that they're seeing in our logo is your chest, and your pecs look incredible. So
Thank you.
shout out to you and the workouts you've been doing, man. It's incredible. It's incredible. What you're
Pandemic. You gotta do like Nando Boom said, 20 push-up temprano en la mañana. Or is that El General?
I don't know.
I want to give a shout out. We have a comment on Facebook. John Shaw wrote in. Speaking of Aunt Candy, she worked with my father. He was a few cars behind her. Thanks for letting us know your comment. Yeah, it was a big loss, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Just Cause, but back to the weekly Rapping with Rapscallions weekly wrap up. How was your week, Joe?
That's right. Well, I think it was a good week. Obviously there's ups and downs, just like any day, especially with the times that we're living in with these pandemic times, man. I was a bit disappointed though, because as you know, I was really looking forward to heading out of the city on the week of the 28th of December. I really wanted to get out because I haven't been out of the city all year. I was going to go to the beach, try and relax a bit, maybe visit you. But then, of course, those plans are no longer going to happen.
Kibosh.
That's right. Because of the new COVID-19 restrictions that we have in place, which, totally understandable because the cases are skyrocketing and we got to take care of ourselves. We got to make sure that we can help the health services to be able to deal with the virus. And we can do that by staying home and not exposing ourselves to the virus. So, I'll have to go again at some other point. But I also want to let you know that I have been jamming this whole week. I gave myself a little birthday present. Not a birthday present, a Christmas present with a Decimo. I bought Shorty and Slim's Christmas album. And of course, we had them on the show last week listening to their Christmas album. So I've been jamming to their Christmas album this week. And you guys can get it at saspanama.bandcamp.com. It's a great album.
Make sure you get it. It's a lot of fun. And there's a track on there with a collaboration by who? Who, Joe? Tell the audience.
These talented guys that go by the name of the Rapscallions.
That's us, by the way.
That's right.
Always fun to have Shorty and Slim on. If you guys missed that episode, you can always find it by scrolling down here on Facebook on our Facebook page, scallions.rap.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Friend? What was your week?
My week was I'm out in the country, so little has changed since I came out here. Since they canceled the play that we were both in, I came back for the country life. 2 of my 4 chickens are laying eggs. I bought myself an omelet pan. Only eggs can touch that pan. So I feel kind of special. I feel kind of fancy. And for those living in the States, Panama's cases were skyrocketing. We were one of the highest reported numbers of cases per million, right?
Yeah.
It was casos por millón, cases per million per capita. So we went back into restrictions. There's a quarantine. 7 p.m. to 5 a.m.
That's right.
Dry law is in effect during those hours. You can't go out during those hours. And if correct me if I'm wrong, but they're doing the gender things, but only for shopping areas, right?
That's right. So I think starting tomorrow, men and women can do their shopping on different days. So I think it starts with women on Monday, men on Tuesday, women on Wednesday, men on Thursday, and that's only for shopping. So going to like shopping malls and supermarkets, etc. You can still go outside.
You can go exercise and stuff.
Yeah, you can still go outside and exercise and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a bit confusing at first. So I think the government really had to kind of send out extra information just to let people know what was up. Oh, cool. And total lockdown from the 24th at 7 p.m. to the 28th at 5 a.m.
Yeah, that was kind of confusing, but I'm usually at home at those times anyway, so I just need to buy some booze in case they do a ley seca, dry law.
Seriously, gotta be prepared, man. Gotta be very well prepared for any eventuality. But we'll see what happens going into January, because I think you and some of the health experts out there are saying that we need stricter rules that these rules aren't really what we need in order to purely, totally control the outbreak of the pandemic, at least until the virus, sorry, or at least until the vaccine gets here. But we'll see what happens in January, man. I guess only time will tell.
Yeah. So, well, it's kind of business as usual. It's just now we're in stricter lockdown. So let's get on with the show, my dear friend.
For
Let's
sure.
we got a bunch of people joining in on Instagram. It's good to see you guys there. Thank you very much for tuning in. And so the topic of today's show is the 20th of December. 31 years ago today, the United States invaded Panama. A lot of people call it liberation. There's many points of view, and I think we need to talk about it more because a lot of stories are being lost about what really happened, and just to, I told Joe this when we were planning the show, is I was in a movie called Causa Justa about the events of the invasion, and the actors who participated in it took their kids, and the kids, when they came out, this was shared in our actors chat and the production chat. The younger folks that had gone in with their parents to go see the movie, when they came out, they're like, that didn't really happen, did it? So
Incredible.
So 30 years, I guess, is the amount of time necessary for our memory, our collective memory, to start fading.
Seriously, it's very interesting too, because I remember even being in when I moved back to Panama from the States, being in high school, so towards 1999, 2000. It was 10 years after, right? And I don't even remember having touched upon it in high school, like the invasion or anything. And I think for me, I think that period of time in Panama is pretty incredible, just because of all the things that happened, bad things that happened during that time, and from history, of course, you're always supposed to learn, because I think we're seeing a lot that, history does tend to repeat itself, actually. And so these are things that we need to learn from. And the fact that it's so little is known about it, I don't know if it's just because people don't, it's just like it's too dark of a time, let's not talk about it. I don't really know.
It's hard to say. Any opinions you guys have out there, let us know. Again, we're not experts. We're just here trying to have some fun, talk about interesting topics, and try and make some jokes. Even though today is kind of a serious subject, we're still going to try and bring some levity to it and try and have fun.
True. In the true rapscallion way, without a doubt.
Yeah. So, I think we need to go back a little bit before we talk and jump right into the invasion. That just didn't happen overnight. We need to go back about three episodes ago. 3 or 4 episodes. We actually had to spread it over 2 episodes. We went over the history of Panama City, and we touched lightly on this, and we wanted to dedicate a whole episode to the invasion. So how far back do we need to go so that people kind of get an idea of how things started escalating?
Well, I think just for referencing, I think where we're kind of like the whole dynamic started to shift. I want to take us back to 1977, which is when the Torrijos-Carter Treaty was signed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I think during this time, it was a momentous historic occasion. All credit to, Omar Torrijos at the time for getting the treaty done. Jimmy Carter, I think he also at the time, President Jimmy Carter, he was kind of like, yeah, Panama should have control of the canal. Let's get this done. And they signed the treaty, which of course, as we all know, said that Panama would get control of the canal, of the operations of the Panama Canal, on the 31st of December, 1999. Right? So that happened. Everyone was celebrating. It was such a joyous occasion. Yeah. Then what happened after that? Jimmy Carter ran against Ronald Reagan in the U.S. elections, and Jimmy Carter lost. Right. Ronald Reagan was of the belief that the canal should belong to the United States. And I think he said, we built it, we paid for it, it belongs to us. Something along those lines. I wasn't there, so I don't know.
Well, there is a debate. You can find it on YouTube. When he ran against Carter the first time, he had a debate against William F. Buckley specifically about the Canal Treaty. And anyone who's interested in that can look it up. It's fascinating. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about the canal. I haven't been born there and a fan of the history, but I watched it, and it was a compelling debate on both sides. And they abided by traditional debate rules. It was very structured. So anyone's interested can look that up on
I think
YouTube.
that's one of those things that last week I said I was going to post on our Facebook chat and I completely forgot. I will not let you down twice.
We'll make sure that's on our Facebook feed, so that anyone who's interested can check it out. So so there's just hitting on the big bullet points of what happened in the past. Torrijos Carter, Torrijos got into power because the United States wanted someone they could control, and that's a whole nother topic there we kind of touched on. So keep going. Carter lost to Reagan.
And then Reagan became president. Of course, we can understand how he felt about the canal. And then from what I've been reading and watching and kind of understanding, Omar Torrijos dies mysteriously in a plane crash. I think I read something about 9 days after Ronald Reagan assumed power in the U.S., after he became the president of the United States. So then after that moment in 1981 to 1983, which is when Manuel Noriega becomes supreme leader of Panama, or whatever you want to call him, there was sort of it was a bit messy. I think there were different people kind of, jostling around for power in Panama, trying to install themselves as the main man. So I think one thing that we've learned from Noriega after everything that we've studied from him over the years, that he was pretty cunning, in maneuvering himself to get the things that he wanted to get. So 1983 rolls around, and this man becomes the new dictator in Panama.
I wanna interject here. Noriega is remembered by history as being villainous, and rightfully so. He did some despicable things, but I don't want to let Torrijos off the hook.
No, of course.
He was responsible for a lot of positive things that earned him the title of a benevolent dictator. But a dictator is a dictator. Punto.
No. I think people even refer to him as like Robin Hood or something, which I think is kind of romanticizing him a little bit. Just with regards to what he did. And it's very interesting because I think if we can just pause there for a moment and look back further in time, when the building of the Panama Canal was happening, we had a lot of people coming in from the Caribbean, a lot of different people coming in that would then lead to, I guess, the growth in what was perhaps the lower classes in Panama. And these were a lot of the people that benefited from Omar Torrijos when he came into power, because he was like a populist, right? He was all about giving back to the people.
He was responsible for the Reforma Agraria, so he implemented a lot of land ownership laws. There was also a setup of a bank where people could apply for interest-free loans to acquire their land and fence it, and earn a living from the land that they're producing. He expanded the school systems throughout Panama, and he announced that anyone born on Panamanian soil is a Panamanian. And my family, we were born in the Canal Zone, so we're U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
We immediately went out and got our cedulas when he announced that. So I think my claim to Panamanian citizenship and my cedula is because of Omar Torrijos. So at the same time, I don't want to let him off the hook, though. He did him and his military dictatorship did things that dictators do.
Yeah, and I think as we discussed last time, he could get away with being sort of like, the handsome, charismatic dude who did all the nice things because he had other people that would do those nasty things.
Namely, Manuel Antonio Noriega, Manny.
That's right, Manny. And when Manny came into power, which, he totally radicalized the Panamanian military. He named, instead of the National Guard, it was now the Panamanian Defense Forces. Supposedly, HB, I read that he had U.S. assistance in establishing the Panamanian Defense Forces with training or whatever have you. And for many, many years, Manny, we can just, I guess, call him Manny just to keep it short, he was really good friends with George Bush. Because, of course, George Bush was the director of the CIA. Manny was an informant to the CIA. And George Bush was now the vice president to Ronald Reagan.
Coincidence?
Who knows?
Is that a good? Do we have any shout outs? Can we segue into a shout out here? Is anyone written in?
No, no shout outs. But I think Chechi is on Instagram, so I'm gonna send it
All right,
a shout
Chechi.
out to Chechi.
Chechi, comment something. Okay.
We've been missing Chechi
So
for a bit.
another thing, when on the 3rd of November, I sent Joe. Remember the video I sent you of
Yeah,
the parades during Noriega's time?
yeah,
It was, it was a military parade, and that's something. When I saw it again, I was like, man, I lived through that, but I didn't quite remember it being so militarized. I mean, you see the Machos del Monte on these anti-aircraft guns on the back of a tank, spinning that thing around. It's just a huge cannon.
yeah.
So he really militarized Panama. Um,
That's right. I think he really kind of wanted to establish it as a military sort of powerhouse in the region, I guess. But I mean, come to think of it, for such a small country, you're never really going to have a giant military, I guess, unless you make everyone that lives here join the military. And then I don't think that would really work because, yeah, the economy will crumble. But, anyways, moving on from that. Okay, he's in power. He's buddies with George Bush. He was an ally to the U.S. during the whole Iran Contra affair, which, if I'm not mistaken, HB, please correct me. There was an arms embargo with Iran, so nobody could send guns or weapons or sell guns or weapons to Iran. But Noriega was selling them weapons on the back end with support from the U.S. And then he was then training Sandinistas in Panama to go fight in Nicaragua. Does that make sense?
I don't know if I want to touch that subject, dog.
Okay.
That
So,
I, that's the gist of it. So there's a lot of spooky business going on, so that the United States and its Cold War policy
mhm.
could start funding places that we thought. That was called the green area. The Middle East was the green area, and they wanted to keep all warm water ports away from Russia and the Soviet Union. So that gets incredibly complicated. I'm by no means an expert on that, but there was shady business going on with the Sandinistas and in Central America. And if coincidentally, there was a lot of dictatorships installed in a lot of places because
Yeah.
supposedly, this is just one point of view,
Yeah.
they felt that democratic governments would be easily toppled. So they wanted to install whoever the powers that be in the United States be, they wanted to install people that they could control, dictators. So that we know from history that plan didn't work out so well. But we've got a lot of shout outs here. We got a lot of shout outs. Sue Norman says, glad you guys are covering an important event. You'll do it justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yaniseli Galindo I was 21 years old and still remember that like it was yesterday. Yeah, absolutely. John Shaw says, I actually have a big bronze plaque taken off the Panamanian infantry headquarters after the bombings with a speech written by Noriega. That's interesting. We'll come back to that later when we get more to the invasion. Luis Luna asks, do you guys think the invasion was justified? See, that's a hard question to answer because there's so many details in it.
Yeah.
And on some, I want to put out a thought exercise out there. If the United States installed these people, then it's the United States' fault for having to liberate Panama from them.
Yeah.
So that's one opinion, one point of view. The other is that since World War II, there's a lot of negative feelings towards the United States in Panama. There's other opinions that state that Dia de los Mártires and Charis they were communists, and that destabilizing threat, even though it wasn't that much of a threat, was something that the United States didn't like. Again, a failed Cold War policy.
Yeah.
So was it necessary? I want to answer it from my own point of view, just by telling a story. I went to one of the anniversaries of Just Cause, and they were showing documentaries. It was the old Union Club in Casco Viejo, which before it was rebuilt, because that was one of the main places that was bombed in Just Cause. They were showing documentaries about Just Cause, and the lady sitting in front of me, she showed up in that documentary, and her husband was killed. Her husband was killed in Chorrillo. So she got up and she told her side of the story. And she was like, United States is the ultimate evil, stuff like that. And when she sat back down when it was over, I was sitting behind her. I was like, I think we have something in common. I lost my aunt, and she was an American and a Panamanian, and she was a school teacher. So I think both were unnecessary deaths. But I like to think that she died for a reason, because so that you and I could have the conversation that we're having right now. I don't think we would have been able to do that had Panama still been in a dictatorship under Noriega or another dictator. So
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of, and I've heard, and I don't want to get too much into this because I know it's what we're going to do later on in the show, but just, some people say, like, if the US had never invaded, there wouldn't have been all these deaths. But there were a lot of deaths happening under the dictatorship, like loads of deaths and torture and mistreatment and all of these things. So, I mean, I guess it really depends on how you ask. Meanwhile, there's a shout out. HB Chechi is actually chiming in with some knowledge here. He says, I believe that as a culture, we have forgotten the influence of the U.S. There's a lot of hate from the pain and the pride from the Canal Zone and the invasion, but there are a lot of good things that we take for granted from the Canal Zone, which is still one of the best engineered areas in Panama, and the fact that we on this day consider the U.S. as a point of reference for what's good.
thanks. Thank you, Chechi, for
Thank you, Chechi,
chiming in.
Valid points. Carrying on then with just kind of like the background to the invasion. So then, of course, we have Noriega in power. He is proving to be not as likable and as charismatic as Torrijos, and I think mainly because he is doing all of his nasty deeds, and people know that he is doing them. He doesn't have anybody handling those things for him. So the public starts to go against him, right? And he has some pretty heavy opposition from people like Hugo Espadafora and Hector Gallegos, people which unfortunately lose their lives. During this time, the Cruzada Civilista is also very active, and I'm sure that many people will remember all the marches that we had of people dressed in white with pañuelos blancos, banging pots and pans, expressing their desire to have him removed from power. I remember this clearly when I was young, just living here in Panama City, seeing these marches and waving the white pañuelo from the balcony with my parents, to the point that my mom told us at one point once, a couple years later when we lived in Chiriquí, she said, if you're ever outside, you can't wear white and don't wave any white flags or pañuelos blancos. Because of course, it was very uncertain times where if you were walking around dressed in white, people would say, look at this guy, he's opposition to the government, and then that would probably be some very serious consequences. So as a child, that was something that really marked me because, what does a 5-year-old know, 4-year-old know about dictators and those types of things, right?
For sure. And, just and from a Zonian point of view, as you mentioned earlier, we're, 20 years into the 10 years into the treaty, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 89. So while Noriega was in power, the planning for the turnover of the canal, if anything was actually being done, had ground to a halt. Yeah. So that increased a lot of incertidumbre, a lot of doubt in the mind of the Zonians that Panama would be able to actually take over the canal. I was like, we can see now from history that it did, but in the climate of the dictatorship, you can see how that would lead to that type of doubt.
For sure, without a doubt. I think it's one of those things that you're then kind of like, who is going to manage the canal when this happens? If things right now are in complete disarray, it's I think it would make anybody anxious, to be honest. So then, moving on, I think the U.S. then began to see that kind of Noriega, he was a pretty good double agent in that he was playing the field with the CIA. He was their informant, and the DEA, giving them a lot of information. But then also, on the flip side, I think he was also working with Fidel Castro in Cuba and a bunch of other different characters. And he was also a pretty big figure in the drug trade within the region, which is pretty interesting if you're working with the DEA and they're paying you for information, but then you're still on the back, just kind of like, take this cocaine.
He was playing all sides. He wasn't playing them against each other. He was just doing what he thought was in his own best interest, and not necessarily in the best interest of the Panamanian public. We got a lot of people tuned in today, a lot of shout outs. I hope I don't miss anyone. Dorita Avila's tuned in. She said Joe's mic is lower. So I lowered my mic. Hopefully let us know if it sounds a little better. Purvis Ham. What's up, Purvis? He was actually in the police station in Balboa. His house was next to the police station in Balboa, where the Arnulfo Arias statue is now. He actually Purvis got hit by wildfire.
No way.
Yeah. Jacob Holbrook has got comments. Ivan Rosas, they're going back and forth. Thanks for tuning in. Shahaira is saying, HB, thanks for sharing. Thanks for tuning in. Arnold Ferguson's whopping HB. He says he remembers his dad said no bombitas. No, don't light off bombitas. Don't light off firecrackers. And he did it anyway. So yeah, it was a scary time. I remember being at my grandma's house, and the Dobermans came through when the civilistas were marching, and one of the tear gas things landed on her balcony. We went inside and closed the door. She was right off of Calle 50. Yeah, that tear gas. You don't mess with that stuff, man.
Not at all, man. And it was I mean, and they were very brave, because I think for the most part, these marches would happen over and over and over again. And then over and over and over again in these marches, you would have then, the government busting in and just shooting, bullets or bombas lacrimógenas.
Bullets too, and yeah. And you mentioned it on our last show that Purvis chimes in. He said 9 times, bled 8 hours before medical care, head, hip, and back. He got shot several times.
Jeez.
I'm glad you made it, brother.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, there you were talking about it in the 2 episodes ago where they would have plainclothes defense force people within the civilistas and inciting violence within the ranks. So that's very interesting,
Yeah, I mean, it was like you were really putting your life at risk, I think, by going to protest against the government. And it was, I guess, you had to respect it, I guess, because these were people that were fighting for their future, for their country. So yeah, man, I mean, especially in these very uncertain times. So then I think in the 80s, everybody's finding out, this guy's not really what he's cracked up to be. And by this guy, I'm talking about Manuel Noriega. They're just like, no, we can't have him here anymore. And in 1988, I'm just going to read this off. This is something that I found online. Noriega was indicted by U.S. federal grand juries in courts in Miami and Tampa on charges of drug trafficking. The indictment accused him of turning Panama into a shipping platform for South American cocaine that was destined for the U.S. and allowing drug proceeds to be hidden in Panamanian banks. Soon after this, sorry, go ahead, HB.
I want to throw some dirt at the U.S. right now.
Throw dirt.
This whole war on drugs, and how they vilified Central and Latin America.
Oh yeah.
About exporting cocaine to the United States.
Yeah.
First, let's dig into this a little bit. First of all, that proves one thing: the United States has a drug problem.
Truth.
Right. So let's think of it this way: if you're the father of a family, and one of your sons has a drug problem, do you tend to your son, or do you go try to kill the drug dealer?
You tend to your son.
Exactly. So what the U.S. policy was to incite violence, and so some poor farmer in Peru decides the only way he can make a living is to grow cocaine. Next thing you know, his house is bombed, in Napalm. So I think it's very poor geopolitical strategy movement from the United States and what they decided to do. But hindsight's always 20/20, and we don't have all the information either. So
truth.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw that in there. If we didn't need to send guns to Iran, we wouldn't have had to create a drug problem in Central America in order to circumvent the policies. So the whole Iran-Contra thing was something that we created. The United States created them. So I got to be careful how I say that, because this is against the United States. And then when I talk about Panama, I say we too. I'm a Panamanian. I'm an American. I'm a U.S. American. So I'll try and keep that straight so things don't get confused. But the head of the snake bit its own tail. They were part of their own problem. They created the problem, and I think that's what our friend Luis was stating when he's like, if we thought that it was justified. It's hard to say, we don't have all the information, but we did live through it, and we need to share our stories. That's all I want to say. Continue. I'm
Hey,
sorry.
I hear you. I hear you. No worries, man.
Tangents
Please.
everywhere.
Hey, we can go on all the tangents, because we have to be flexible. If anything, we are as rapscallions, it's flexible.
That's true. Check this out.
Without, look at that, mad flexibility. That's
Ouch.
insane.
I was reaching for my bottle of rum. I got to keep it closer next time.
Yeah, totally. You don't want to break any bones. All right, so I think we can all agree Noriega was no bueno, and I think the U.S. at this time, they were also kind of trying to fix maybe something that they did. I don't know. I mean, and we all know that Ronald Reagan was massive. He's the one that started this whole war on drugs thing, wasn't he? I remember being in school in the States, and we'd have people come and talk to us, with the dare to keep kids against drugs. The war on drugs, man, because drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad.
Don't do drugs.
We can do a whole show about how to treat drug addiction and things like that. But anyway, so the United States had a drug problem.
That's right. And Panama was causing it.
Panama was causing it. Yeah. So I was at a banking conference, and this is a huge tangent. I'm sorry, Joe.
Go, man, go.
The bankers from Mexico, one of the bankers from Mexico, and they're talking about transparency and cybersecurity and whatnot. He came up with a slideshow, and he's like, and he apologized before he gave it. First, he said, we need to talk, and I apologize to all the Panamanian bankers here, but laundering money is like water; it finds its own level. So if you had to launder millions of dollars in U.S. currency, where would you go? So he was implying Panama. But anyway, he was from Mexico. And the reason why he brought this up is that because of the war on drugs, the cartels moved from Colombia to right across the border of Mexico. And that's where we find them today. And so some of the things that he said, and it was fascinating. I'm not sure if I should be sharing. But anyway, it was interesting. He said that two of the things that the banks in Mexico did to try and curtail the mass income of drug money was all large-scale purchases, boats and homes particularly, but then luxury cars and boats could not be purchased in cash. You had to go through a bank to do that. So as soon as they did that, the money laundering went down a bit, and the funds ended up going somewhere else, aka Panama. And this is recent. This is after Noriega. So he came up with a chart, and he showed that 80% of all the cocaine made in Central and South America ends up in the United States. 80%.
80%. Wow.
80%. And that doesn't include seizures and the other 12% that goes to Europe and Asia.
Wow.
So the biggest client is the United States, and it seems like Central and South America gets lashed for not only drug trafficking, but money laundering when it seems to be a United States problem. Anyway, that's the dirt I want to throw. That's my opinion. I just want to share.
But at least it seems that like the drug problem isn't that bad down here then. Drug use problem. The drug making problem is, but not the drug use.
I don't know.
I don't know. Anyways, that's jokes. Anyways, moving along with our story. So this was in 1988 when he was indicted on these charges. And then there was an attempt at a coup, which didn't really work out. It was very poorly planned. And
I wanted to add to that too, is one of the reasons why that first coup failed, I believe that was the one in January that you're talking about, was because there was supposed to be a rendezvous with U.S. forces who completely just said, we're not going to show up.
This is the next one. This is another one which had nothing to do with the U.S. Sorry. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Forget you guys heard that. So it didn't happen. The coup, boom. Everything went down the crapper, as they say. So 1989 rolls around. 1989, which would prove to be a very incredible year for Panama. But just to mention to everyone before this, HB, I think you can back me up. The U.S. was actually actively trying to get Noriega to step down from power, right?
Yeah.
They were just like, hey.
Well, that's one of the things, like that embargo that the United States placed against Panama ended up hurting the Panamanian people more than Noriega. I mean, we still joke about it today. When you find a dollar that's just so crumpled up, we call it a Noriega dollar. This is from the tiempos de crisis. So I think that was a misstep on the side of the U.S. because Noriega had millions of dollars in France, by the way, who just put us on the blacklist for transparency. Again, I go off on tangent. I get excited, Joe. I'm sorry.
It's okay, man. We live off of excitement.
We live off of excitement. Yeah. So yeah, the trade embargo by the U.S. and they were trying to pressure him publicly to step down. The Civilista movement was part of that. I think there was people involved in underground radio broadcasts to try and motivate the Panamanian people to step up and force Noriega to power. And I mentioned it last time, it's not without precedent. And in the Philippines, the Filipino public they all just got up one day and they went to the presidency and they're like, you have to leave. And the guy left. So I think that's what they were hoping, that history would repeat itself in Panama. But as we know, that didn't happen.
And I think they offered him money as well, right? They were like, hey, dude, we'll give you some money. Just leave. And he was like, no, man.
I'm sure they tried all that stuff. Yeah.
He was like, I'm staying here. Life is good. I have all this cocaine.
I can slap my machete here. My witch doctor's in the other room. I got my mistresses. The guy was in power. Why would he leave?
Yeah, seriously. So then, 1989, we have a presidential election because Noriega was like, you know what, guys? I'm a decent dude. I'll let you guys hold your elections and have your democratically elected president. But you know what happened?
Mm-hmm.
It was all marred in controversy.
Indeed.
Because obviously he wasn't going to just be like, hey, guys, I'm cool, whatever happens. He wasn't cool. He wasn't cool, man. So you had Guillermo Endara, Billy Ford, and I think it was Ramon Arias Calderon. Please tell me if I'm mistaken with the name. They were running against Noriega's candidate, which I think was Carlos Duque, if I'm not mistaken. And they won by a landslide because obviously nobody wanted to have Noriega's party in power anymore. But then Noriega said, no, this didn't happen. You guys are wrong. You guys lost. And even Jimmy Carter, who was there, he was here, not there, here in Panama to observe. He was like, hey, guys, this is not cool. You're not doing it right. But Noriega was like, oh, I don't care what Jimmy Carter says.
I don't care.
He's not president of me. So then chaos, and I'm sure everyone has seen the images of Billy Ford covered in blood when the motorcade was going through Panama to celebrate the rightful victory, I guess. Though some people also say, HB, that the U.S. helped to fund Guillermo Endara's campaign. I don't know if that's true or not.
Again, I don't have access to the CIA secret documents, but I absolutely think they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard somebody said if the U.S. did that, then they were breaking international law because if some foreign government were to fund a candidate in the U.S. elections, that would be illegal.
I don't think they funded him directly. I think what they did was they funded other strategies to like they didn't give him cash. What they did is they had, again, pirate radio stations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And organization helping organize and strategize what they were going to do.
Right. And just kind of like raise up support from the people around to kind of mobilize and vote and try and get Noriega's party out of power.
Right.
So then this happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even so, like if the point you just made is super interesting, like they actively manipulated a foreign country. So yeah.
So I mean, it's very it makes you think, right? Because I was reading about this and I'm thinking like, man, so much stuff was going on behind the scenes that I don't know, maybe none of us were aware of, or people at the time weren't aware of, like, the different hands that are back there just kind of making things happen. the
That's
hand
what
that rocks the cradle.
Lisa P. Harold just chimed in. She says she's vexed, and she makes a good point. The treaty was signed by a military leader, not the president of the time. So, I agree with that point. There's
Totally.
so many aspects of history that make it kind of hard to voice what actually happened. And I don't think there's any succinct way to express what actually happened. But it is a good point. There's so many things that were going on, and so most everything that we have is opinions because we weren't there. We have our parents telling us stuff, and so there was a lot of goofy business going on there. Let's try and keep moving before we stall out.
100%. And then here, HB, after this moment is when we got to the point that you were referencing earlier on.
The coup attempt, a second coup attempt, where there was supposed to be a rendezvous. I believe it was in Albrook, where I think it was 7 of the generals or colonels and generals, a mixture of 7 colonels and generals, were going to, with the aid of the United States, remove Noriega from power, and that did not happen.
No, apparently during, I guess, from what I can understand, during this time, so the generals, these guys, they managed to take control of the comandancia, the cuartel, where Noriega was with his troops. They took him out. They had him, all ready and stuff. And then supposedly the U.S. was supposed to block certain roads, right, and not allow Noriega's troops to roll in and help him out. This didn't happen, and they got there. They managed to turn the tables. They captured all the guys in this coup that tried to take him out, and then they were all assassinated. And I think this is referred to as the Albrook Massacre.
Yes,
I think, right?
Indeed it is.
Yeah. And then I think this totally. It sounds. I mean, can you imagine if you're like, yes, we're finally gonna get to do it, and then I think from a perspective of the U.S., if you're saying just kind of like, we didn't have to do anything proactively, all we have to do is block a road, and this was done by the Panamanian Defense Forces on their own, right? But I don't know. Of course, George Bush, from what I've read, denied it completely. He said that there was no plans for a coup, and that wasn't supposed to happen.
Right. Yeah, getting a lot of commentary here. John Shaw says that he saw an interview where Noriega said that his arrest was trumped up. That the thing about the cocaine was all made up. That this is paraphrasing Noriega, that the United States was afraid the communists would build a canal in Honduras.
Honduras.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we got a lot of commentary in the chat. We're very active. I'm having a hard time keeping up on it. So let's keep going. We'll try and jump in and pick up some of the comments. We love the audience interaction, by the way.
Seriously, it's all about the interaction. Thank you, guys. So then this happened, and then boom, Noriega declares a state of war with the United States. I think this is when stuff started amping up, right? This is around the time with the machete.
Yes.
And the thing.
Ni un paso para atrás, ni un paso atrás.
And then it's very funny as well, because then, of course, you have a lot of back and forth, right? You have Noriega saying things, and then you have George Bush saying things, and then he's like, he's a liar. No, he's a liar. No, he's a liar. And then you're kind of like, but you guys were friends, man. There's pictures of you guys sitting down talking stuff out.
Yeah, you posted a picture earlier this week. It's a nice setting of 3 gentlemen, 2 of them being George Bush and the other one being Manuel Noriega. So those guys were inche pinche, if you know what I mean.
I mean, it's really incredible. It's really, and then all of a sudden, George Bush is like, he's a crummy dictator that nobody likes. And you're like, but you had him in your office, and you guys were like talking about stuff, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, anyways, that blew up. And then, from what I could understand, HB, a couple after he declared war, which I think was, a silly thing to do, but hey, what are you gonna do when you think you're the king of the world?
Mm-hmm.
Certain things happen, right? Tell me if I have these right. So, first, on the 16th of December, 4 U.S. personnel were stopped at a roadblock in a Chorrillo. They were unarmed. They were going to have dinner at the Marriott, is what I understand, the Marriott at the time. And they were dressed in civilian clothing. They were unarmed, and they were detained by PDF troops, Panamanian Defense Force troops, and a crowd. And apparently, when they were trying to get away, shots were fired, and a lieutenant was killed. in the process.
Yes. And, it's strange that they're driving to the Marriott through Chorrillo. But
Yeah.
anyway, they didn't have Waze back then.
That's very true.
They have Google Maps.
Yeah. And then also there was an American couple that witnessed it happening, and then apparently they were attacked. The husband was beat and the woman was threatened. I don't know if anything happened to her, if they assaulted her in any way, but I think there were fears that she did get assaulted. So I think sort of like these actions were just kind of like, I guess they're like were tipped. El vaso estaba ya casi llenito, llenito. It was almost full of the glass, and then this was the one last drop that just kind of made it overflow.
Yeah. Yeah, it had been building up. It was gaining momentum. And, it's another one of my opinions is that I don't think the United States wanted to keep the canal per se. They wanted to keep their military bases here.
Yeah.
They had a huge installation in Quarry Heights in the tunnel, which was like what you see in the movies. They had all these screens and people with typewriters all in this tunnel dug into Quarry Heights. So I think they had a nice, they were like dug in ticks, and the U.S. military wanted to keep their bases here in Panama. That's not necessarily the canal.
Control.
That's
the
my
canal.
opinion. My opinion.
I mean, because I think in theory, I think one of the things that, well, not in theory, because the treaty said this, right, that the U.S. would still be able to use the canal even once it was handed over to Panamanian control. So I think either way, and plus there was a whole protection clause in there that if anything were to happen to the Panama Canal, the United States could kind of swoop in and keep it safe. Right. So yeah, I totally agree with you that, I mean, it didn't really make much sense to just want to keep the canal, but keeping the bases, on the other hand, is a very good strategic location.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Especially when they're funneling so much attention, and by attention I mean money and military forces into Colombia for the war on drugs.
Yeah, exactly. So then I think on that, then George Bush kind of has to get support to have the invasion take place, and I think he had 4 objectives which he mentioned specifically, which gained, I think, support that he needed from the powers that be back in the U.S. And it was to safeguard the lives of U.S. citizens in Panama, because there were 35,000 U.S. citizens living here at the time. He wanted to defend democracy and human rights in Panama. He wanted to, of course, combat drug trafficking, because Panama had become the center for drug money laundering and transit point for drug trafficking to the U.S. and Europe. And he also wanted to protect the integrity of the Torrijos-Carter treaties. So basically, I think these were the 4 main objectives that he used when he sort of told Congress, everyone stateside, like, hey guys,
I want to invade. I think it was called a police action, wasn't it? Or
yeah, something like that.
So that a lot of military strategists. How is that called? The rum's starting to take effect. Anyway, that a lot of people say that invasion set a precedent for policing actions afterwards. Like now that they had invaded Panama, they were kind of able to manipulate how the commander in chief could proceed with police actions elsewhere, like Iraq, Afghanistan, things of that nature. Anyway, again, I go off on a tangent.
When I was a kid, I used to think, wouldn't it be cool? Because, you see all this violence going on in the world and wars and stuff taking place. And you'd be like, man, wouldn't it be cool? I would think, at least, if there was like an island nation that had all the power in the world, and they would intervene in countries whenever war broke out, and they would stop the war, right?
You mean like the United Nations?
Something. Well, they don't have an army, so they can't intervene with their army, and that reminds me of a Dave Chappelle sketch. But anyways, we're getting we're getting way off topic now.
Yeah, we're trying to have fun. It's a very serious topic, so we're trying to inject some levity into it. We're comedians first and foremost. Joe and I
Yes.
are, so that's
We
how
are,
talk things.
and we don't mean any disrespect whatsoever, as HB says. We're just trying to.
We're both, Joe's Panamanian and I'm a dual citizen. We love everybody. We really do.
We do.
We love each other too. We're
do.
a team.
We're a
Rapscallions
team.
forever.
No doubt, no doubt. Chechi's commenting. He says the Avengers. He says the Avengers could do that. But I think the Avengers were all American, weren't they?
Yeah.
So it'll be the same thing.
You change Captain America to Captain of the Americas, or
Captain of the Americas. Captain of the Americas. I don't know. Anyways, so based on these 4 facts that George Bush presented, people were like, dude, you got this. Go for it. So on the 20th of December, 1989 at 1 a.m., Operation Just Cause took place.
Now, this is where I want to intercede with some of my own experiences.
Go.
Before the invasion, I had another shirt here. I can't find it though. We had the PML ratings. PML Alpha was situation normal. We had been in PML Charlie, and then we went Delta and Echo. Echo means that all hell's breaking loose.
And what is PML? Sorry.
I have to look it up, but it was like the bases had a rating system for the danger that might be happening. So
okay, all right,
we were in a state of readiness, so to speak, as in
got it.
It wasn't me,
like vigilance and whatever have you.
Yeah, state of vigilance on the military bases. Now, for the people who didn't understand the Canal Zone back then, a lot of people say the Canal Zone was there's 2 things to keep in mind. There was the civilians or the Zonians, and then there was the military bases. So the military bases were where you could not go into. Even Zonians needed to have proper identification to go into. So I just wanted to make that point. Because if you think of Amador was a joint base between the United States and the Fuerzas de Defensa. It's one of the places that got seriously pummeled. So that was a Panamanian military base within the former Canal Zone.
And I think that's, sorry to cut you off, but I think that's something a lot of people maybe don't know or don't realize or don't understand, is that, there was a lot of training taking place which involved both groups together.
Yeah, there was here we go. Personnel movement limitation.
Got it.
Thank you for chiming in.
Thank you.
So there was a train. There was, like you said, there was a training base in Albrook. I think it was called Escuela de las Américas.
Yeah.
Where all the different militaries would train together in Panama under the umbrella of the United States military. So what I wanted to chime in is that, I remember very clearly the events of the day before, of the evening before. Me and my friend, I lived in Diablo, and Diablo was the first town site to be turned over. And the PRD, or the people that were related to the dictatorship, they were gifted. A lot of people were gifted properties in Diablo. A lot of colonels, Panamanian colonels in the Panama Defense Force, were living in Diablo, and that's where I lived. And I was a junior high, and me and my friends wanted to go to the movies. I remember the movie. We were going to go to Clayton Movie Theater and watch Black Rain with Michael Douglas. And a lot of people, we were going to get a group together, and a lot of people said, my parents won't let me out tonight. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I had no idea, but I think some families got more of the bunch of the Radio Bemba, so to speak, about what was about to happen that night. Even though we've asked, and a lot of people say no, there was no information flowing. But anyway, besides that, we were trying to go to the movies. A lot of parents wouldn't let their kids out that night. So it was me, a friend of mine, I don't want to say any names, and the three people from Diablo were going to go. And we went to Clayton. We noticed a lot of troops and APCs, armored personnel carriers, were on the lawn in front of Clayton. You know, when you drive to Clayton now, there's that big lawn before the buildings start.
Yeah.
I mean, all that area was full of troops
Oh,
and
really?
full of,
Wow.
yeah. And I thought to myself, I think my dad drove us there. You know, oh, why would they be doing exercises so close to Christmas? You know, they've been running exercises so much that it was escalated, but it seemed kind of like
normal.
like normal, you know, like, you know, there's more of them. It was like, oh my god, it's Christmas time. Shouldn't they be like chilling out a little bit? So
Yeah.
that was the opinion at the moment. So we went and we watched the movie. We went back home. The movie wasn't that good, by the way.
No,
So I want to watch that movie tonight. I think just Michael Douglas. He's in Japan riding a motorcycle. Anyway, so we get back to Diablo, and I was going to spend the night at my friend's house, and David Letterman was on. I remember, and this was before 1 a.m. My friend's father worked at Motor Transportation Division, which was in Curundu, right on the outskirts of the division between the former Canal Zone and Panama. And one of his workers got shot. So he left the house and he had to go tend to this news. And that doesn't show up in the reports. And then we're watching Letterman, and that's when the PML started changing.
Right.
So that was before 1 a.m. And
how
also,
would you know, sorry, HB, how would you know it would start changing? Would there be announcements made on
there's alerts.
television?
Yeah, you're watching, like, the English channel was broadcasted by the military bases. That was SCN, Southern Command Network.
Right.
And then you had the regular Channel 2, Channel 5 was the educational channel back then, Channel 13. So on Channel 8, that was the U.S. military station that was in English. They would have little PML things in the corner, you know, and you'd see Echo, you know, Delta. I think it was Delta at the time. So we were surprised, you know, and then it kind of clicked. Me and my friend were like, hey, that's why there was so much movement going on in Clayton. And I think it was about an hour later, my aunt was driving back from Los Rios, and there was a skirmish in front of Albrook. And remember that Diablo had a lot of the Panamanian Defense Force colonels in it.
Right.
And so there was some kind of skirmish going on in front of Albrook, and her car, the car that she was in, her and my uncle, was shot up. And he drove to Corozal. There was a military unit there, and they had a first aid tent. He took her there, but it was too late. She got hurt in the kidneys. She died almost instantly from what I was told. And so me and my friend are watching David Letterman, and he had, in the house in Diablo, he had big bay windows overlooking the park outside. And we started seeing Panamanian troops running with AK-47s going across the windows. And that was before we hit Echo, you know? And we learned after the fact that all the colonels that were living in Diablo were stockpiling munitions in their houses in Diablo.
Wow.
So we saw, like, troops. I saw it before the actual invasion started. This was probably around 11:30, 12 o'clock. We saw Panamanian troops running with full gear, jaunting across the window.
Wow.
And then a little bit later, there was that skirmish in front of Albrook, and then we all just hunkered down, and that's when you started hearing the bombs going off. So,
because everything, the majority of the, I guess, of the I guess the fire, I guess it's like fireworks, for I don't know, for sake of a better word.
Yeah.
Everything happened. The firefight. Everything went off from 1 a.m. That night, right? Or was there still fighting going on after?
No, there was. Do you mean when did it? Yeah, I think it was synchronized.
Like all the bombings and everything, because all the images that we've seen, that I've seen at least, of what it was like when the invasion occurred, it was 1 a.m. full force, boom, 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 take out specific locations, and then later in the morning, the troops started to arrive, like ground troops started to arrive, or throughout that time, I guess. Because I think it was. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. But it was more coordinated. It was completely coordinated.
Yeah, okay.
They focused on certain points, the key points, and then they started rolling troops all throughout Panama and creating roadblocks and trying to control and take over everything. Um,
I remember seeing some images of helicopters landing in Panama la Vieja, just like all these, like personnel carriers just landing. It must have been incredible to be there and see this happening. And then the people in the area, they seemed pretty. I mean, they were just kind of like, yeah, hey, how's it going? There wasn't any sort of hostility towards the U.S. Soldiers, at least in that area, in the images that I saw. Of course, obviously, the images from El Chorrillo and these other locations are completely different.
yeah. Uh, you know, my point of view might be a little biased, but my recollection of it was that, I mean, I think almost everybody was happy
Mm,
that it was happening.
right.
Uh, that's the tone that I got from watching TV. I don't know. That's not a good source, but
Right. Well, actually, now that you say watching TV, one of the things I was watching this morning. I was watching old news clips from the U.S. As they were transmitting when the invasion was going on, and there were two main things.
okay, we got a little problem with our connection. We'll just hold out. That happens in Panama. Thank you, Cable Onda, keeping us on our feet. Um, we'll be right back. If you guys can still hear me, we'll just wait a little while, see if we can't get that connection going again. I just keep talking. I can do this for hours. I think what Joe was getting at was that um, it was he was trying to gauge the perception and see what was the perception of the Panamanian people during that time. And okay, looks like we're coming back. Um, all right, we got internet back. You
I'm
can always
back.
count on Cableonda to give us a little bump on the road.
That's all good. That's all good.
We're back. It's good to have you back, Joe.
You gotta
I just
rise.
kept babbling just in case people were listening.
You gotta rise in
Uh,
adversity.
just to jump back into the topic, and if anyone wants to give us a free internet, please feel free to do that. Anyway, you were trying to gauge the public perception in
Yeah.
Panama at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from my point of view, I always felt that it was overwhelmingly positive, and I think that actually led to situations where some Panamanian people were so happy to see the U.S. troops they went out to say hi and
Yeah.
might have become casualties because of that action.
Well, I remember some friends of mine when I lived in Chiriquí telling me that they remember because they were even over there, right? And they would get their pictures taken with the soldiers and everything. Because I think almost everyone at the time recognized Noriega to be a bad man who was doing bad things, not only on a global scale or whatever have you with the war on drugs, but just in Panama. I mean, could you imagine the stress that it must have been like to live under those conditions?
Well, you had the whole population of Panama. They had a hard time buying food.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a lot of cash. There was government coupon checks. Um, uh, so I think the population, because of the stress that they had been in, not only because of the ill effects of the Noriega regime, but also the negative effects of the trade embargo
True.
that the United States had on Panama.
True.
People are without money and they're without food,
Yeah.
which seems kind of poignant now that we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
People are coming into the same situation.
Exactly.
So I think the overwhelming feeling was, hey, now I'm going to be able to get food.
Yeah.
I'm
True.
going to
Now,
be able to feed
yeah,
my family. So
and live hopefully a normal life once we have a democracy reinstalled into the country and things go back to normal. Which, and I think is also important to note that when the invasion was happening, I think they had taken Indara and his crew to Clayton, and I think they had sworn him in as the president of Panama as the invasion was going on. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to mention earlier before I got cut off was, so I was watching these news clips, right, from like 89 when the invasion was happening. And two of the things they kept on mentioning were the first one was at the Marriott Hotel, which was like a meeting point for Westerners in Panama.
Yeah.
So they were saying, the journalists were saying, they're there to protect United States citizens and U.S. interests. They should know that the Marriott is the meeting point for all these people. Why aren't they protecting the Marriott? Like, why aren't they sending troops to the Marriott to protect the people that are there? Because apparently Panamanian defense forces were going into the Marriott to take American journalists and things out of there. So that was their main complaint, was they should have known this already. And they were going off on the military. They were just saying, like, these guys have no idea what they're doing. And the second one was, why are they blowing up all these things if they're only going in there to get Noriega? And we were speaking about this earlier.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the U.S. would have, like, you know, all the technology and the intel and stuff. Be like, Noriega, where is he? Oh, he's in Del Prado, in El Cangrejo. Drop a Navy SEAL on him and extract him really quickly. But that's the way I would see it, I guess. Maybe I've seen too many movies.
Well, I mean, there's something that we haven't been talking about is that one of the first things that happened in the invasion was the rescue of Kurt Muse from Carcel Modelo.
Very true. Very true.
That's the very first thing that happened. Because they were told, the United States was told that if any action is going to be taken against Noriega said it. He's like, if anything happens to me, there's a guard right outside his door and he's going to shoot him. Right. That was the ultimatum. So I don't know if that was the entire reason for the invasion. A lot of people opine that it is, but I think that from a strategic point of view, that had to be the beginning of the invasion. That had to be the beginning of Operation Just Cause. So that prison break from Carcel Modelo was that was in El Chorrillo, which, you know, I live in Casco Viejo, so every year around this time there's a lot of there's parades and whatnot for what happened in Chorrillo. And I think I would like to share my opinion, even though it's not a popular one.
Yeah, do it.
Because I think history is being forgotten there. One thing I'd like to mention was that Balbina Herrera was the head of housing, the Ministerio de Vivienda. And, you know, she was the first one to arrive, but, you know, the condition of the housing was in that area was deplorable. It was old wooden housing. And so the United States bombed Carcel Modelo, which is in the middle of El Chorrillo. And, you know, after that, most of Chorrillo burnt down.
Yeah.
So what I heard at the time was that the Fuerza de Defensa troops that were there actually set Chorrillo on fire and took their uniforms off to try and escape being captured by the U.S. military forces.
How interesting. Can I pause you there for 1 second just to say, because I heard in the videos I've been watching and stuff that U.S. troops were setting fire to houses in El Chorrillo.
No. But at the time, I recall, you know, a lot of the maids and domestic employees from the Canal Zone lived in El Chorrillo. And I heard firsthand accounts from our maids saying that it was the Fuerza de Defensa. You know, right. Now, maybe it was both. Maybe a stray bullet went off. It's entirely possible. But the idea here is to share stories so that people can do their own reading and their own investigation and come to their own conclusions. We're not experts. So.
For sure. And I mean, I think in a war, you're always going to expect explosions and fire, and because you're not going to drop a bomb somewhere and not expect something else to explode and catch fire. But then I guess if you're seeing it from the point of view of if I'm trying to see it from the point of view of the Panamanian Defense Forces, they probably knew they were outmanned, outgunned, and didn't stand a chance at winning this war that was going on. So that would seem like a totally, you know, logical thing for them to do, I guess, just to kind of blend in with the crowd and sort of try to escape.
There are in the publications on the Panamanian point of view, popular popular publications state that they do cite certain occasions of, especially in Santo Tomas, where uh, some members of the Panamanian Defense Force were using the doctors and civilians at Santo Tomas Hospital as human shields when the United States rolled up. But can't find any mention in current publications of the Panamanian Defense Force lighting Chorrillo on fire
Yeah.
to create smoke and distraction in order to escape.
But I think that's one of those things where you kind of, I mean, one of the things that I think we can all agree is that, well, I don't know if we can all agree on it, but I don't think everyone is really satisfied, I think is what I want to say, with the numbers of the casualties that happened during the invasion and how these casualties came about to happen.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where they're still investigating it, but then you kind of wonder how long does it take to investigate it, and when will it be enough? When will you say, okay, we're satisfied with what's been found?
That's a very fine edge to balance on, in my opinion. I mean, that I think on one side you absolutely have to portray history and say people died in this, and what happened, but also we just keep in mind that a lot of the anti-American or anti-United States rhetoric is created by people who want to take power. They want to keep that sentiment alive to gain favor from the population who's happy and will vote for them for a bag of rice and a bottle of seco.
Yeah.
So that nationalistic type tone works. It's worked throughout history, and again, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned that because I actually met someone a couple of years ago who told me, they said, I don't learn to speak English because of what the Americans did to us in the invasion. And I thought that was interesting because this person was limiting themselves in life. I mean, sure, they had their reason, but I just thought it was very interesting because it still exists to this day. I guess with the older generations that remember it and feel very strongly about it and have their opinions about it, whereas the younger generation doesn't even know anything about it and could really care less.
I did, yeah, and I have I went to a friend's house for New Year's Eve in downtown Panama, and they invited me into their home, and it was a party, and I was very happy to go, and they wanted me to meet their grandmother, and because I have the face of a gringo, she wouldn't say hi to me. She got up and walked away, so there was and I mean, that's an isolated incident, but that type of attitude does exist. The anti-American, and again, I'll throw dirt at the U.S. all day. My allegiance is to my neighbors. We're all neighbors on this earth. We got to find a way to be happy and get along with each other, because I don't think any government has its public in its best interest.
Oh yeah, no, and I think it's one of those things where you kind of think about it and you say, okay, fine. I would understand what people would say, like, okay, the dictators were put in place by the U.S. government because they were trying to keep communism away from this side.
Yeah.
And then when they saw that these dictators were no longer working for them, they said, okay, we're going to get rid of them. And then the way... Sorry?
Yeah, please go.
Yeah, no, the way the whole situation happened, it was like, it's like kind of like when you're doing an experiment, I guess, with ants or something, like, say you have a bunch of ants and you're like, oh, I'm going to kill the queen and see what they do, and I'm going to put a piece of sugar and see what they do. And that was basically what it feels what was happening, right? The United States had all this power, and they were just kind of moving pieces along, and they had the money and stuff to kind of make things happen. Unfortunately, that resulted in serious consequences for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then,
the ultimate consequence.
Yeah. So then what do you do now? How do you honor what's happened, or not honor it, but kind of learn from what's happened, and keep moving forward when you find yourself still being in situations that will potentially be similar to the past. Just got
Yeah, I was super deep, and it's insightful. Again, I want to touch on that feeling of nationalism, because the United States isn't in Panama anymore. Well, there's always an influence here, but
Yeah.
Panama has the control of the canal. We've gotten through the invasion. There's still so many stories that we're not telling, but I think that feeling of nationalism is continued to be used so that the people who are robbing and stealing now from the Panamanian public can use it as a shield. So that's my opinion on using that anti-American rhetoric. Is you always, if you have a common enemy, then you can unite people.
Yeah.
So that's just a tool of lowbrow politicians.
And it's something that. Sorry, go ahead. No, it's something that's happening all over the world.
Yeah.
It's
Venezuela,
all over the world. Yeah.
You know, I was in an Uber, and I'm always talking. I love talking to people. I love collecting stories. And the Uber driver, I was telling him, because I was on the way to rehearsal for the play. We're talking about 1903, and then we're telling stories, and he told me a story about where he does mixed martial arts, and the dojo that he runs here in Panama, it's a chain, and the owner of the chain is Venezuelan. So he got into a conversation with the owner, and the Venezuelan man asked him, he's like, was it as bad during the dictatorship in Panama as it is right now in Venezuela? And what he told me was, he's like, I didn't know how to answer that question to my friend. So I told him a story. He's like, when I was a young man, I might have been, he said he was in high school, and they were in the area by the Estadio Roberto Duran, the racetrack area.
Yeah.
And it was him, 2 male friends and 1 female friend, and they were walking down the street, and the Fuerza de Defensa took the girl and started raping her. And when one of his friends went to try and stop him, they shot him in the leg. And then they took all of them. They didn't know what was happening to their female friend. They took all the males to prison and beat them for 2 days. And when they got out, they found out that the female had ended up in a hospital. His friend got treated for his bullet wound, and he said that's what happened to me during the dictatorship. And his Venezuelan friend told him, he's like, wow, it seems like it was a lot worse here in Panama than it is in Venezuela. So my fear is that these stories are getting lost. And before I go off on another tangent, can I talk a little bit about the Zonian point of view during the invasion?
Yeah, speak on it, please.
I touched on it earlier, where a lot of people who were in military families, their sons and daughters weren't allowed to go out. Like, they knew something. And then the Zonians, we didn't know anything. And a lot of people have asked, how come there were still the air defense sirens in the canal zone? They would test them, and if an air raid came in, those sirens would go off. And we always ask, how come they didn't use that during the invasion? So last year was the 30th anniversary of the invasion, and at the Canal Zone reunion, they had a symposium kind of where they had people talking about it. And one of the interesting stories that I want to relay here was that they didn't tell anyone in the administration building of the canal that they were going to invade. So
really,
no one, not one person.
Wow.
And I'm going to mess up the names, but I'll get this. I'll try to relay the story. After the events of the first days of Just Cause, the administrator or the deputy administrator yelled at the Secretary of State. He actually yelled at him. He told him, he's like, look, there was a tanker going through the canal when you guys decided to invade. Had a stray missile gone and hit that, the canal would have completely exploded.
Wow.
And we can't even calculate the loss of lives that would have happened. And so that to me is very interesting. You don't have someone yell at the Secretary of State and have the Secretary of State tell you, I'm sorry, we messed up. So the canal, none of the canal knew what was going on. None of the Zonians knew what was going on. We lived in the build-up to the events of the invasion, where there was a lot of harassment. Armed gunmen coming up to cars and tapping on the windows, and the Panama Defense Force held a school bus. They held a school bus full of, I think it was junior high students for 14 hours. But I don't remember seeing that in any of the reports. They canceled the rest of the school year, and everyone sent their kids to the States. So that type of harassment, there's no loss of life, but that was the tone of the era, so to speak. I can't relay what it was like to live in Panama City during the time, because that wasn't part of my experience. But I think it's very important that we start collecting and sharing these stories.
Oh no, for sure. I totally agree 100%. I mean, I think my family and I moved out of Panama like 4 months before the invasion. But I remember in the build up to it, there were moments where, like I said, my mom would just kind of be like, "You guys can't go outside dressed in white. Don't," because for us it was fun, right? Waving the white la bandera blanca. We were like, oh, and the whole cara de piña, like all that stuff.
Yeah, you couldn't say that.
You couldn't say that. And as a child, how would you know? And if you were outside and you said it, that would have grave ramifications, like it would have a huge impact on your family. And I remember one evening we were at home, and we were all sound asleep, of course. And then my parents came into the room. They woke us up because apparently the Dobermans were like driving around, and they were busting into people's houses looking for civilistas or all that stuff. So they had to take us out of our beds, and we had to leave through the backyard, back door, or whatever, where our aunt was waiting for us. And then we got into their car. We went to their house, and we all spent the night at her house, just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. So it was very uncertain times, and I think people, we can't forget about that, because I don't think we would ever want to live in conditions like that again, man. It's ridiculous.
And I think the sharing of the stories, I think we need to move away from was the U.S. right, or was Panama right, or a lot of important stories are gonna get missed if we polarize the subject. Governments play chess, and the public suffers.
You're right, because it's just for how long are we going to argue about who was right, who was wrong?
They're both wrong, obviously.
Yeah. exactly. I mean, but it's been wrong for a while. Like it's been.
Yeah.
So it's like let's try and make things right, if possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of messed up stuff happened. We're getting a ton of great stories in the comments. I do apologize that we won't be able to read all of them on the air, but thank you so much for writing in. We love audience participation.
Hey, can we just do a quick? So let's see. During this whole time when this invasion was happening, Noriega was running around from house to house in Panama, because let's not forget, this is the guy that we're here to get.
Okay. Yeah. They couldn't find him, so we glossed over. I'm sorry. I probably went off on a tangent when you were about to make your point.
No, it's all right.
How come the U.S. didn't find him with their high technology?
I don't know. I don't know why. But they couldn't find him. And I read this book, by this guy whose last name Kempe. I keep forgetting his name now, but it's a great book. America's Divorcing the Dictator is called the book. It's like super, super thick. Incredible book. It's very detailed. And it says that, Noriega was moving around from house to house. He was trying to hide. This was a guy who he knew he was in his last sort of, he wasn't going to get out of this one, right?
Yeah.
So he was going from house to house. I think at one point he even dressed up as a woman to try and disguise himself so that he wouldn't get caught. This guy ends up at the Nunciatura, which is the Vatican's embassy in Panama, right? And he goes in there, and the nuncio's like, "Yeah, I have to give you, come in here. I guess you can hide here." So
he couldn't deny him.
He couldn't deny him. Yeah, exactly. So he goes in there, and there's this movie called God's Favorite. Have you seen this movie called God's Favorite? No, it's a movie about Noriega, basically, in the invasion. Hold on. I'm just going to do a quick Google search. Research department.
Send it to the research department.
Yeah. God's favorite. It's a very, if you can see it, I would, I totally recommend it. I know it was on Netflix a couple of years ago, which is where I saw it. It's called Noriega, God's Favorite, and it's with Bob Hoskins.
Oh,
Bob
yeah.
Hoskins,
Yeah. I
Bob
did see that.
Hoskins plays Noriega. So, and it shows the whole thing about him showing up at the Nunciatura, and the Nuncio, like, okay, you can sleep there. And he has this room, which is, of course, nothing compared to the lavishness that he used to have before, right? And then when the Americans rolled up, the armed forces rolled up, they can't, like, bust into the Nunciatura and be like, hey, holy man, give us this guy, we want him. So they started pumping rock music
Yeah.
out of their speakers, right, to get him out, because Noriega hated rock music.
Yeah, that was there was a term for that too. It was
What was the term?
shock and awe or something like that. I can't remember. It was funny, and it was funny, especially me being a kid. I was a punk kid. I was like, why would he not like listening to this music? It's awesome.
You were like, I would have been in there rocking out, like, yeah, keep it
Yeah.
coming, guys.
I was like, who's the DJ on this one, man? That's some good music.
Oh gosh. So then I guess he couldn't handle it, and I think he asked someone to bring him his general uniform or whatever have you, at least according to this movie. And then that's the way he handed himself over to the U.S. authorities. And then of course we have the pictures of the guy with him on the plane, and he's being handcuffed, and he's all like,
Well, the one of the speakers at that symposium was talking about at the last Canal Zone reunion. She told a story about how she was hired. She was asked to participate in getting intelligence. She was a Zonian. She worked for the military, and she was perfectly bilingual. And she told us a very short story of her involvement in that. But
right,
essentially, she would jog every day in Amador and jog amongst the Fuerza de Defensa buildings. And she eventually, after, doing this for a while, she eventually ingratiated herself with Noriega's mistress.
wow, okay.
Yeah, and the story was amazing. I'm not doing it justice at all. Hopefully, the Canal Society will release the tapes of that symposium, because it was fascinating. All the things that they talked about. But she told a story about how she ingratiated herself with Noriega's mistress and called her repeatedly, like, hey, this guy, if you really love him, you need to talk to him. You need to tell him, if he turns himself in, at least he'll be alive, and
Yeah.
she told, so that was an interesting thing to hear about how, someone someone that I know had an influence on having Noriega turn himself in, where he insisted that he have his general's uniform. That's why they brought it in.
That's wild, right? That's crazy. And then, well, this happened on the 3rd of January 1990. So I think this is what, 14 days after the invasion. So I mean, kudos to him for managing to keep himself on the run for so long and not having.
I don't see what problem he has with rock music. I really don't.
I know, man.
That's a crime against humanity, right there.
I mean, good thing that he got caught then, because any person like that deserves to be in jail.
Yeah,
without a doubt. And I got the book's name real quick. It's called Divorcing the Dictator: America's Bungled Affair with Noriega. It was written by Frederick Kempe. Very interesting book. Very interesting book.
Now, do you have any memories of the actual night of the invasion? What's your recollection of those events?
No, I wasn't here. I was my family had moved to Miami like 4 months before the invasion. So I remember seeing it on the news and thinking, like, my parents would be like, oh, look, that's in Panama. And we were like, oh, wow. Yeah. So it was just kind of a bit, I remember being concerned, obviously, for my family, for my friends that were still over here, and hoping that nothing bad would happen to them. Because, I mean, every time you see helicopters kind of just landing in places, you're like, man, nothing good can come of this, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I think I was just scared for them.
I like, to me, it's all a big blur. It's I was just to pick up on The last thing I said was that there was Fuerza de Defensas running in front of a bay window
Mm.
in Diablo. That was around midnight. I apologize. My neighbor is starting to have a big party. I guess the the quarantine doesn't. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Anyway, so I was at my friend's house. The next morning, I woke up and my dad had come. They I, they woke me up early. I was like, we could hear the bombing and everything, but I found it strange that my dad and my uncles came to pick me up, and they took me home. They all had their guns on them. They were all police members of the old Canal Zone police force, and they took me in. And my mom, I went into my mom's room, my parents' room. My mom told me that my aunt Candy had been killed the night before, and I think I was too young. I couldn't really process what was going on. There's just too much going on. There's
Yeah.
the sound of bombs everywhere. And the next few days was my dad had packed up some of his guns and had gone to help my uncle with whatever he had to do because my aunt had perished to her wounds. So it was me, my sister, and my mom. And my mom was chief of administrative services branch, which meant she was in charge of the people who worked for the canal
Mm.
and the Panama Canal Commission. I think I don't know. She had a big title. So me and my sister both had our own telephone lines, and so we're in Balboa Heights, up by the administration. No, we were in Diablo back then. Oh my goodness! So we were all in the hallway, and we had all three telephone lines pulled into the hallway, and we all had notepads, and we were helping my mom answer the phone and writing notes down and handing her the notes and trying to. I don't remember what we were doing. It was just receiving calls and making sure the right calls were being made. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I spent my days of the days following the invasion. Was answering the phones.
That's so. I mean, I imagine so many people must have been scared, concerned, not knowing what was happening. Because, like you said, people in the canal zone, Zonians, didn't know this was going to happen, right? So I
Right.
guess this must have come as much of a surprise to you guys as it did to anybody else.
Yeah, it was a complete surprise. We had no idea. My parents wouldn't have let us out if they'd have known.
Yeah,
And
I think
one
that's
of
probably
the
another misconception right there that Zonians were aware that the invasion was happening.
there was a huge party. There's always a big party towards Christmas time because all the Zonian students were coming back from studying in college, right?
Hmm.
So I was too young to participate in that, but for some reason, the party they were forced to have the party in Cardenas, and you know, a lot of the parents said that they didn't know that there was an invasion coming, but for some reason, maybe by the grace of the fates, all the kids who were of a partying age were in one central location in Cardenas, which is right on the border of Clayton, a military base. So they they escaped any injury that would have happened during the invasion had they been in any other location.
Right.
So I don't know if that's happenstance or what, but it's it's fascinating that a couple hundred kids, teenagers and college kids, avoided being uh, involved in this invasion just because of where
Yeah.
they chose to party at.
No, for sure. Dude, and did you know one of the things I learned when just reading up for this conversation was that this was like the biggest US military intervention since the Vietnam War? Something like that, right? Is that true?
Something to that effect, yeah. And that again, that it's kind of like, I know I'm going to mess this up, but usually you have the president, the commander in chief, has to ask the legislative branch for permission to start a war.
Hmm.
And then now that's when we started shifting towards police actions. And just cause is like the modern version of Vietnam, where
Right.
it's not really a war, but we're going to go do this because we have to. It's very important.
Yeah.
And I'm not a military expert, but it did kind of pave the way for things to come.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. And then just I think after Noriega was captured, um, and he was which was on the he entered the Nunciatura on the 24th of December, and of course when this was when this happened, a whole bunch of other stuff was happening around the city. I mean, it's incredible just the like there was a really a conscious effort to take control of Panama by the U.S. forces just to make sure each and every province. You think why would they have to go to David? What's going on in David? You know, in Chiriquí, but no, man, everywhere, incredible. I think after he was captured, then Just Cause ended, and then another operation called Operation Promote Liberty began.
Right. Absolutely correct. I think one of your fellow Chiricanos here, Frank Serrano, said, "My family and I were the only ones that crossed from David Chiriqui to Gorgas Hospital on December
Wow.
24th. The 6-hour trip turned into a 10-hour trip due to checkpoints."
Yeah, I bet.
Uh, so yeah,
Wow.
that's a long. You guys check out the comments to see the rest of Frank Serrano's comment there. Keep going, Joe. Let's make sure we hit all our bullet points.
Yeah, no, and then so then once Operation Promote Liberty begins, and I think Operation Promote Liberty was basically just about, I think, kind of establishing a sort of democratic regime in Panama once again.
Exactly. Yeah, it was to get the voted, the elected, the president elect installed into power, and getting the Panamanian uh, political machine moving again.
And this ended. Operation Promote Liberty ended. I think. Just let me check my notes here really quickly. It ended in 1994. I think
Wow.
1994, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, that's wild, man. That is wild. Yeah,
Well, you
September
can imagine the
1994.
the whole economic, the Panamanian, uh, it just after so many years of dictatorial pilfering, um, just getting the economy back on track. Not only on the side of the dictator, but on the side of the embargo. I mean,
Yeah.
the Panamanian economy was in complete disarray. I can't imagine what it was like to live on that side of the embargo.
What were things like in the canal zone after the invasion ended? Like what was like say once the new year rolled around, you everyone knew Noriega had been captured. What
Yeah,
were things like over there?
everyone was celebrating. Everyone was celebrating.
Yeah.
I mean, people were printing shirts and they were in the streets waving shirts and flags and that I mean again that was my perception at the time that it was overwhelmingly accepted by the Panamanian public. Of course, the Canal Zone was in complete joy that the dictatorship was over. I mean, we obviously we were more shielded. We were more a target of harassment,
Mm,
but we weren't the subject of physical violence the way the Panamanian people were.
yeah.
So we were definitely the target of harassment. I remember we had to change. The Canal Zone had their own license plates, and that differentiated Zonians from Panamanians and made us an easy source of, of being harassed by the Panama Defense Force.
Because you were easily spotted, right?
Yeah, you could just look at the license plate. I'm gonna go point a gun at this guy.
Yeah.
Now,
Scare
I
them for a
mean,
bit.
and their goal was to harass. It wasn't to kill. Whereas the Panamanian public would be under the complete control of someone in that level of authority and that level of power.
Wow. That is crazy, man. I must, yeah, that must have been like terrifying. Because even though you knew they weren't gonna kill you, I mean, it was still one of those things where they were just kind of there to scare you. But
Mhm.
again, you never know in these types of situations what will what will happen. You know, because anybody can say, "Oops, my finger slipped. I shot him."
And again, in a time in any police action, it's young kids, man. It's kids going out there and having to play soldier. They're both feeling the same thing, man. It's Can you imagine that? They're both scared. In
Yeah,
any other situation they'd be friends, but they're forced to fight each other.
Yeah.
So it's just a
HB,
messed up situation. Yes, sir.
can you tell us a bit about your role in the movie you were in, where you played a key member in that specialized strike team that went to rescue Kurt Muse?
So in the movie, it was historical fiction. It was they were trying to make a narrative about the events of the invasion, which is not an easy task. But the real life counterpart to Kurt Muse had a different name in the movie, but essentially it was someone who was helping an underground radio station and promote the elected president, was captured, and I played the part of the Delta Force. My name was Delta One. So if you do see the movie, don't blink. Don't blink. So it was pretty cool to. I saw Kurt Muse at that at the reunion, and I grew up with his kids in school, and Ann Muse is a good friend of my Aunt Taff and Uncle Tim, and she's a school teacher in the Canal Zone. So I went up to Kurt and I was like, hey, yeah, that was a great speech, but I wanted to tell you, they just filmed the movie in Panama, and I played the guy who pulled you out of the. I played the Delta Force guy who pulled you out of the Casa Modelo, and he got a kick out of that. I took a picture with him. So that was a lot of fun to be able to relate it. And actually him and Leo Witznitzer, who played him in the movie, knew each other. So that was kind of
Oh,
neat.
word! Oh, that's cool,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think we mentioned the name of the movie. It's Operación Causa Justa.
Yes.
It came out in 2019. How was that? Did you have any sort of? How did it feel for you? You know, having such a history with Panama, then playing this role in the movie, because you were also involved in like a shootout in a cemetery
Yeah.
in the movie, not in real life, in the movie.
I think what they try to capture. I mean, there's so many. Like I said, there's so many stories.
Hmm.
So they had a Herculean task in front of them, trying to portray the point of view of the Panamanian Defense Force on the big screen. It's not easy to do all those special effects and stuff. So it was kind of cool, but at the same time, anytime I play a gringo in a Panamanian movie, I always feel like I get cast as the bad guy, But
Right.
it's just my bias, I think.
Yeah.
And they did they tried really hard to capture Just Cause. It's just a moment of chaos, and I liked the movie, but there was too many stories being told at one time, and it kind of muddied the waters, in my opinion. A lot of people really enjoyed it. I did enjoy it, and of course, all my fellow actors, great jobs, man.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I went to see it and I was really excited. Well, just to see the story be told and also to see so many friendly faces as well.
Yeah, I want to add to it was great to see the stories told, and that kind of, I think what you just said hit the nail on the head. When I was participating in the movie and when seeing it, I was like, these stories need to be told. That really reinforced that determination in me to start collecting stories about Just Cause. And when you wanted to do a show about Just Cause, I was kind of uneasy about it, because having grown up in the Canal Zone, it's not an easy subject to talk about, because we have families from Panama and families from the United States, military families versus Zonian families. And, I think the most important thing to do is talk,
No, for sure. And I think it's like what you said earlier, we're just trying to talk about it, keep it alive. And you and I don't know everything that happened on there, but maybe it'll motivate us to search even more. It'll motivate people listening us to search even more.
Yeah, I hope it motivates people. Maybe someone will pick up a book and be like, you know what? They'll be interested to write their memoirs about it.
Because I think it's just interesting that now we live in this country, which, I mean, for the most part, it's pretty great. But of course, it still has its problems, like all countries.
Yeah. So was the invasion justified? I think after past hour and 50 minutes talking about it, I think for the people of Panama, I think it was justified. I think that the politicians and the dictators made bad decisions. Again, the Panamanian people suffered the most. So I have to say that, yes, I think it was justified.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions, which will hopefully be answered one day. But yeah, if you just think about it, where we would potentially be today, I don't know. Would we still be in a dictatorship? Would the invasion have been even worse?
What would have happened about the turnover of the Canal de Panama?
What would have happened with the turn? Yeah,
We got to put something else on that list of things to post on our Facebook page. We have to post the Reagan debate with Walter Buckley,
yeah,
and we have to post the ACP did an incredible documentary talking about how the leading members of opposing political parties decided to get together and figure out what the hell they were going to do when it was time for them to receive the canal.
really.
And it's super interesting. Super interesting. We'll have to post that too. That was on the ACP webpage. I think it was last year on the 30th anniversary of the invasion.
Right? Fitting, very fitting.
So let's we're winding down. We've got 10 minutes left. I want to do some shout outs.
Let's shout.
We got some friends on the Corona Junior High School group. Jeffrey Ellis said that it was something to see. He saw on TV they're firing cannons across Fort Amador Golf Course. Eric Rogers says, I remember armed soldiers escorting my school bus to Corona Junior High School.
Wow.
Let's see, we got all kinds of audience participation. Really, we're getting some invitations. Lisa Harrell invites us to Crossroads Christian Academy to have a U.S.-Panama relations class. Oh, that sounds interesting.
Cool, for sure.
Frank Serrano says, thanks for the show. Great topic. Jahida says, thank you both. My family PCS to Panama in 1991. As a 15-year-old teenager, I was ignorant to everything in my classmates had gone through. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you tune in every Sunday. We try to have fun, but we also we don't mind getting a little dirty, get our hands dirty and talking about serious things.
For sure.
Maria Klaus, hey, wow, you two are very talented and knowledgeable. Thank you. Thank you, Shorty and Slim. Well, be sure if you guys are still tuned in, we're gonna close the show with the song Panama City, which who helped write that with Shorty and Slim there, Joe?
A pair of very talented guys that go by the name of the Rapscallions.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Dina King Malden says OPSEC, Operation Security. There's all kinds of good stories in the. Ralph Furlong says he escaped into the jungle and survived. What kind of joke that is. Sue Norman says Jeff Norman, Danny Norman's older brother, was at that party in Cardenas.
Oh, word?
You guys listening, we had Dan Norman come on. He's an engineer. He grew up in the canal zone. He worked on the expansion of the canal. We have a super interesting show. What was that? 4 episodes back about mega projects.
Oh, my God, incredible.
That was super fun. All right, Joe, where we got to go to wrap this up?
Man, I don't know, man.
So let's wrap it up quick. Andara was placed back into power. The economy was in disarray.
That's right.
From my point of view, there was a very jubilant feeling in the streets of liberation. There was also, a lot of people who had suffered the ultimate loss in Panama.
Yeah.
A lot of loss of civilian lives.
Yeah.
I think the Wikipedia page quotes like 350 Panamanians lost. And recent figures have come out that, some people in Panama believe that figure to be up in the thousands, even 2000s.
Yeah.
So there's still no clear number on how many people lost their lives. I don't know. Maybe we toast to the people who gave the ultimate sacrifice during the Operation Just Cause. And here's to their families. I don't even have the words to justify what happened to them.
Look, I think we just got to make sure that we continue living our lives in a way that will honor that sacrifice and make sure that I think like we've been saying on and on throughout these past couple of, this past hour and change, we have to learn from the past and make sure that we build our future in a way which takes these losses and turns them into lessons,
Yes. Yes.
without a
Absolutely.
doubt,
Yes.
and keep moving forward. Because, yeah, I think I agree with you. I think after Noriega was removed, people were pretty jubilant. People were pretty happy. I mean, they wanted Noriega gone, they wanted him out. Um, and then after that, it was a democratic country where the things that happened were
Ta-da.
in the hands of the people, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
For all
So
intents and purposes.
right. So we went from a dictate. Panama went from a dictatorship to republic, the Republic of Panama, with a democratically voted government. I we can dedicate a whole show as to my feelings of the current political situation. Joe and I were talking. When we're planning for the different shows, we do a lot of thinking with rum,
Yeah.
and a lot of the feelings that are coming up now during the pandemic. We're losing, we've lost our liberty to move around because of a pandemic, and 30 years ago we lost the liberty to move around because of dictatorship. So just comparing and contrasting those two very different things that ultimately lead to us not being able to live the lives as we want was an interesting thought exercise.
Most definitely, without a doubt. I want to do a quick correct myself really quickly. So Guillermo Endara, I don't know if I said the name correctly earlier. Guillermo Endara's two vice presidents were Billy Ford and Ricardo Arias Calderon.
Ricardo Arias Calderon, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
just to clarify that really quickly. But no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think throughout this year it's been kind of interesting thinking about what we're living now and what was lived back then, and just understanding the similarities, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, just having different forces come to the same ends. There's a lot of people suffering in Panama right now. Most people are given the vales, the digitales.
Vale Digital, yes.
It's $100 a month, and I don't think anyone anyone out there could live
No.
honestly live on $100 a month. And
No.
they've just passed a law, or I don't know if it was a law, but maybe it was an amendment saying that less people, if there's more than 3 people in the family, only one person. So some families have gone from $300 a month to $100 a month.
It's ridiculous.
And anyone under 25 can't receive that benefit from the government. The students went and protested, and they were met with police violence,
Yes.
which is very scary. So because of the pandemic, my dirt throwing I'm starting to get an itch. I need to talk about it. We need to keep our check on our government, man. I think they're taking massive liberties right now.
Yeah, and I think when we say that everyone has to learn from the past, everyone has to learn from the past.
Yeah.
Not just because if you're in a position of power, it doesn't mean that you're exempt from learning lessons. No.
No, I think the U.S. has a lot to learn. Panama has a lot. Everyone, and there's so many people out there that are good-natured and that would be good leaders, but the political system is not something that invites you to be a leader. It seems to me that people are attracted to that position because they feel like they could take advantage and make money. It's not. We're not attracting the type of people that want to do good for the rest of the nation. So that's
right.
Across the earth.
No doubt.
All right,
we have 2 minutes left.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
You guys out there, keep sharing stories, keep investigating, keep reading books. It's super important that these stories get written down and are journaled in some way. And reach out to someone. And, we have to learn from our past. I think this is the 8th time we said it today on the show. We have to learn from our past, and I don't think we are. I think we're committing the same mistakes. And whenever our freedoms right now in Panama are being limited because of the pandemic, I'm not saying that we should be going out. We should actually be responsible citizens and stay home, wash our hands, and limit our social interaction. But while we're doing that, the government's taking advantage and pilfering and plundering, much like they did during a dictatorship. That's all I want to say. Joe, can you take us out on words of wisdom and uplifting?
Words of wisdom and uplifting.
You kind of did it earlier, so maybe you can repeat most of that. That was beautiful.
Thanks,
We try
man.
to end the show on a
positive.
First, tell us about next week.
Next
week's show.
Next week on the 27th of December, we're going to have a show where we're going to try and recap all the positive things that have happened in 2020. We know it's been a rough year, people, but we're going to try and acknowledge, identify, and transmit some of the positive things that have happened. We're going to try and have a special guest all the way from Honduras, Ricardo Argurcia, aka Nemo. He will hopefully be joining us.
And that show, in contrast to today's shows, which today's show was very informative and was very serious. Next week's show, we're going back to comedy. We're talking about positive stuff that happened in 2020, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So be sure you tune in so that we can end the year right.
For sure.
Take it away, Joe. Wrap us up.
And now I just want to tell you guys, man, hey, remember what I said earlier? Turn all those losses, turn them into lessons, man. Lessons of things you can do better, things you can improve. We're still in the holiday season. You know, we've had a rough year. We've had some difficult times, but we're still here. We're still moving forward. We're still learning. So make the most of it. Stay safe. Wash your hands. And stay within your family bubbles if you can so that you don't spread the virus, man, because apparently there's a new strain out there somewhere which transmits a lot faster, and we don't need that in our lives right now. So just enjoy yourselves. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone. We're going to close the show with Shorty and Slim's song Panama City. You can find their new Christmas album on saspanama.bandcamp.com. Make sure you check it out. Every Sunday, 3 p.m., Rapping with Rapscallions. Make sure you tune in. You can like our page, and that way you can check out old episodes. We're going to have a podcast soon. Stay tuned. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. See you next
guys. Thank you, HP.
Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad. Ay, mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama. 15 August 1519, the beginning of a dream. It is important to know this date because it's the day that we celebrate. Pedro Arias Davila received from the King of España official doctrine for the fealty to be named Panama City, Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, bella mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama, a fishing village it was formerly, right upon the coast of the sea. Cathedral tower built up toward the sky, you can hear that bell toll far and wide. At this time within the nation, there was a very small population, only 100 people or so. First European settlement on Pacific coast, Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, ay mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama. The Camino Real, it paved the way, and in this Xmas it had to stay all the way to Nombre de Dios. If you go now, you can hear them ghosts. Whoa! Riches came up out of Peru. Many ship and the pirates knew all the pearls, silver and gold. Panama City was Pacific stronghold. Then they crossed Panama by mule. Tropical diseases was very cruel. Finally arrived to Atlantic coast, departing for Spain from Nombre de Dios. Panama City, Panama City. Welcome to Panama, bella ciudad, ay mi Panama. Bienvenidos a Panama. 15 August 1519, the beginning of a dream. It is important you know this date because it's the day that we celebrate. 15 August 1519, the beginning of a dream. It is important to know this date because it's the day that we celebrate. Panama City, Panama City.